2 years imprisoned for telling the truth. They thought I would never come back, but I came back with evidence, and now they will pay. They locked her in an asylum. Now she's back with the truth that will destroy them all. The white corridor seemed endless. The smell of disinfectant, the metallic sound of locked doors, and the empty stares of patients formed a scene that should never have belonged to her. But there was Clara Moretti, her wrists marked by months of restraints and an expression that didn't carry madness, it carried memory. And that night, she walked with a single purpose. In the Moretti family's conference room, everyone laughed, toasting the empire's new phase. The complicit psychiatrist was there, in an expensive suit, being praised for solving the problem. Until the door opened. No one breathed. Clara entered slowly. Her shadow stretched across the floor like an omen. She placed a thick black folder on the table, heavy, impossible to ignore. "You called me crazy," she said with a steady voice, "but let's see if you keep saying that. After you hear everything I recorded." Silence, panic, guilt, and for the first time they were the ones who looked sick. Clara smiled, not out of revenge, but because finally it was the world that was about to wake up. Before becoming her own family's nightmare, Clara Moretti was known as the discreet, intelligent, dedicated daughter, the one who never competed, never complained, never took up too much space. She grew up surrounded by luxury, but also by closed doors and conversations interrupted whenever she approached. Her father, founder of a multi-million-dollar empire, trusted her, but after his death, everything changed. Stepmother Verena took control of the house, half-sister Olivia inherited the attention, and Uncle Grant, the silent mastermind behind the frauds, began treating Clara as an obstacle that needed to disappear. But Clara wasn't naive. When she found falsified documents and suspicious transactions signed by family members, she never imagined her search for truth would cost her own freedom. They called it a psychotic break. They called it dangerousness. They called it care. But it wasn't care. It was fear. Fear that Clara would discover the farce that sustained all their lives. And now, after years locked in an asylum, she's back, not to reclaim what was hers, but to reveal what was theirs. Keywords: family betrayal, false institutionalization, corruption, gaslighting, hidden fortune, revenge, justice, whistleblower, psychiatric abuse, truth exposed. Clara Moretti was 7 years old the first time she realized her family kept secrets. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no slamming doors, just silences. The kind that fell like curtains whenever she entered a room where adults were talking. The kind that made her feel invisible even when standing right there. Her father, Richard Moretti, was different. He saw her, really saw her. Clara Bear, he'd called her, pulling her onto his lap in his study while he reviewed contracts and blueprints. "One day, all of this will make sense to you. And when it does, I want you to remember, truth is the only currency that never loses value." She didn't understand then. She was too young to grasp the weight of his words, too innocent to see the shadows gathering around their family's fortune. The Moretti empire had been built on Richard's vision. Commercial real estate, luxury developments, strategic investments that turned neighborhoods into gold mines. He'd started with nothing, and by the time Clara was born, the Moretti name opened doors across 3 states. But empires attract vultures. Verena came into their lives when Clara was 9, sleek, sophisticated, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She'd lost her first husband to cancer, she said, and had a daughter named Olivia, just 2 years older than Clara, beautiful and brittle like spun glass. Richard married Verena within 6 months. "She needs stability," he'd told Clara, squeezing her shoulder. "And Olivia needs a father. We're expanding our family, sweetheart. Isn't that wonderful?" Clara had nodded, but something cold had settled in her stomach, something she couldn't name yet. Wonderful wasn't the word. Olivia moved through their home like she was marking territory. She'd accidentally break Clara's things, then apologize with tears that made everyone forgive her instantly. She'd interrupt Clara's conversations with their father, draping herself dramatically across his desk with complaints about homework or friends, or anything that would steal his attention. And Verena watched everything with those calculating eyes. "Clara, darling, why don't you go play?" she'd say sweetly whenever Clara tried to join family discussions. "This is boring adult stuff. You wouldn't understand. But Clara did understand. She understood that papers disappeared from her father's desk after Verena had been in his study. She understood that Uncle Grant, Richard's younger brother, started visiting more often, always leaving with sealed envelopes and tight smiles. She understood that her father was beginning to look tired, worn, worried. "Dad," Clara asked one evening when she was 13, finding him alone in his study, staring at a spreadsheet with numbers that didn't seem to make him happy. "Is everything okay?" He'd looked up, startled, then smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes either. "Everything's fine, Clara Bear, just complicated. Can I help?" His expression softened. "You help by being exactly who you are. Smart, honest. Don't ever change that, okay? Don't ever let anyone convince you that truth is negotiable." Keywords: childhood trauma, parental manipulation, family secrets, financial fraud, trust broken, warning signs, protective father, toxic stepfamily. 3 years later, Richard Moretti died of a heart attack in his study. Clara found him. She was 16, coming home from school, calling out her usual, "Dad, I'm home," and receiving only silence. She'd climbed the stairs, pushed open his study door and found him slumped over his desk, one hand still gripping a pen, the other clutching a document she'd never seen before. The paramedics said it was instant, massive coronary failure. Nothing anyone could have done, but Clara remembered his face, not peaceful, not serene, shocked, almost betrayed. And the document he'd been holding, gone by the time she looked for it the next day. "Probably nothing important, dear," Verena had said, her hand cold on Clara's shoulder at the funeral. "Your father had so many papers. We'll sort through everything properly." Uncle Grant had nodded. "Leave the business matters to the adults, Clara. You focus on grieving, on healing." But Clara didn't want to heal, she wanted to understand. The will reading was brief. Verena received control of the estate until Clara turned 25. Uncle Grant was appointed CFO of Moretti Enterprises. Olivia received a trust fund, and Clara received her father's study. "He wanted you to have his books," the lawyer had explained, "his desk, his personal effects." It seemed like a consolation prize, a pat on the head. But Clara knew her father better than that. Richard Moretti never did anything without reason. If he'd left her his study, there was a purpose. She just had to find it. For 2 years, she searched quietly, going through books, checking for hidden compartments, reviewing every paper in every drawer, and slowly, carefully, she began to piece together a picture that made her blood run cold. Transfers to offshore accounts, contracts with signatures that looked wrong, investment deals that didn't match the company's public records, and at the center of it all, Grant Moretti's initials, over and over and over. Her uncle wasn't just the CFO, he was bleeding the empire dry, routing money through shell companies, falsifying reports to the board, and covering his tracks with Verena's help. Keywords: suspicious death, inheritance theft, document tampering, offshore accounts, embezzlement, uncle villain, estate manipulation. Forensic evidence. Clara was 18 when she tried to confront him. She'd prepared carefully, making copies of everything she'd found, storing them in 3 separate locations. She'd practiced what she'd say, how she'd present the evidence, how she'd demand answers. She'd walked into Uncle Grant's office at Moretti Enterprises with her folder of proof and her father's sense of justice burning in her chest. "Clara," Grant had smiled, leaning back in his leather chair. "What a pleasant surprise. What can I do for you? You can explain these." She'd dropped the folder on his desk. He'd opened it slowly, flipped through the pages. His expression never changed. "Where did you get these?" "Dad's study. They were—" "Clara," his voice was gentle, concerned. "Sweetheart, these are complicated financial documents. I think you've misunderstood what you're looking at." "I haven't misunderstood anything. These accounts don't match the public filings. These transfers are completely legal." He'd stood, walking around the desk, to place a fatherly hand on her shoulder. "I know you miss Richard. I know you're looking for something, purpose maybe, connection to him. But this isn't the way. These are evidence of complex corporate restructuring that you're not trained to interpret." His grip on her shoulder tightened slightly. "Clara, I'm going to say this because I love you. You need to let this go. This obsession isn't healthy." Obsession. That was the first time someone used that word. It wouldn't be the last. Clara left his office with her folder and a growing sense of dread. She'd expected anger, denial maybe, even threats. But not that. Not the gentle voice, not the concerned expression, not the implication that she was the problem. That night at dinner, Verena had touched her hand. Grant called. "He's worried about you, sweetheart." "I'm fine." "Are you?" Olivia had asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "Because you've been acting really strange lately. Locked in Dad's old study all the time, talking about conspiracies." "They're not conspiracies. They're facts." "Clara." Verena's voice had sharpened slightly. "Perhaps we should schedule an appointment. Someone to talk to. Someone who can help you process your grief in a healthier way." The trap was being set. Clara could feel it closing around her, but she couldn't see it yet. Couldn't see how every word she said, every piece of evidence she presented, was being reframed as delusion, as instability, as madness. She was still fighting for truth. She didn't realize she was fighting for her freedom. The document she'd found in her father's cold hand, the one that disappeared, it was his real will, and it left everything to Clara. Clara found the second will entirely by accident. She was 20, had just finished her junior year of college, with a double major in accounting and law, choices that made Uncle Grant's jaw tighten and Verena's smile grow thinner. "Such practical subjects," her stepmother had commented, "though I do worry you're becoming a bit obsessive about numbers." Everything Clara did was being reframed. Dedication became obsession, intelligence became suspicion, questions became accusations. But she'd learned to be careful, to smile, to nod, to pretend she'd let it go. She hadn't. The discovery came during a renovation. Verena had decided to modernize Richard's study, Clara's study now, though she was rarely allowed to use it anymore. "You're at school most of the year anyway," Verena had reasoned, "and this house needs updating." Clara had come home for spring break to find construction workers tearing out the old built-in bookshelves. "Wait," she'd shouted, startling a worker who'd been prying at the back panel. "Those were my father's. You can't just—" "Miss Moretti." The foreman had stepped forward, uncomfortable. "Mrs. Moretti gave us explicit instructions. The whole wall comes down." "I don't care what she—" Clara had stopped, noticing something. A gap behind where the worker had been prying, not just empty space. A shallow compartment, barely 3 inches deep, running the length of the bookshelf. And inside it, a metal document box. "What's that?" the foreman had asked. Clara's hands had moved before her brain caught up. She'd grabbed the box, clutching it to her chest. "Nothing, family papers, I'll take care of it." She'd locked herself in her bedroom, her childhood room that still had the same pink curtains from when she was 12, and opened the box with shaking hands. Keywords: hidden documents, secret compartment, true will, evidence discovery, renovation sabotage, family vault, legal proof, inheritance fraud. Inside were 3 items: a flash drive, a handwritten letter, and a will, dated 1 week before her father's death. Notarized, witnessed, completely different from the one that had been read to the family. Clara's hands shook as she read. "I, Richard James Moretti, being of sound mind and body. To my daughter, Clara Ann Moretti, I leave controlling interest in Moretti Enterprises 51%, the family estate, and all associated assets and accounts. To my wife, Verena Moretti, I leave a monthly stipend of $20,000 for life, provided she vacates the family estate within 90 days. To my stepdaughter, Olivia Hunt Moretti, I leave her existing trust fund with no additions. To my brother, Grant James Moretti, I leave nothing. He knows why. He knows why." Clara read that line 5 times. Her father had known. He'd discovered what Grant was doing and he'd cut him out completely. But this will had never been read, never been filed, never been acknowledged. Which meant the will that had been read, the one giving Verena control, the one making Grant CFO, was either a fake or an outdated version that should have been superseded by this one. The letter was worse. "Clara Bear, if you're reading this, I'm gone and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't act sooner. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. I'm sorry I brought wolves into our home and called them family. Grant has been stealing from the company for 3 years. Verena has been helping him. I have proof. It's on the flash drive. Accounts, transfers, falsified reports, everything. I confronted them yesterday. They denied everything, but I saw fear in their eyes. Grant asked me if I'd told anyone, if I'd shared my suspicions with the board or the authorities. I said no. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to have everything in order before I destroyed my own brother, but now I'm not sure I'll have time. Grant looked at me differently when I told him I had proof. Verena touched my arm and suggested I see a doctor. Said I'd been stressed, wasn't sleeping well. They're going to act, I can feel it. So I'm leaving you this, all of it, the truth, the company, the means to fight back. You're stronger than you know, Clara. Smarter than they realize. They'll underestimate you because you're young, because you're kind, because you never learned to lie. Use that. Let them think you're weak. Let them think you're confused. And when the moment comes, when you have everything you need, burn their world down. With love and faith, Dad. Clara read the letter 3 times before she realized she was crying. He'd known. Her father had known he was in danger, and he'd left her everything she needed to finish what he'd started. But he'd also died 3 days after writing this letter. Massive heart attack, nothing suspicious. Except now, everything was suspicious. Keywords: suicide note, father's warning, inheritance theft proof, death conspiracy, family betrayal evidence, hidden flash drive, murder investigation, corporate fraud. Clara plugged the flash drive into her laptop with trembling hands. It was comprehensive, devastating. Years of evidence compiled with the precision of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. Spreadsheets showing money flowing from Moretti Enterprises into shell companies registered in Grant's name. Emails between Grant and Verena discussing the problem, which became clear was Richard himself. Communications with offshore banks, falsified board reports, forged signatures, and something else. Something that made Clara's stomach drop. Emails between Grant and a doctor. Marcus Webb, a psychiatrist with a private practice in Manhattan. Grant, she's asking questions again, more persistent this time. Dr. Webb, has she shown any signs of instability? Emotional outbursts? Paranoid ideation? Grant, not yet, but she's isolated, few friends. Spends all her time alone with her father's papers. That could be framed appropriately. Dr. Webb, if you need an evaluation, I'm available. Pro bono, given our history. Grant, let's keep that option in reserve, but good to know we have it. The emails were dated 6 months ago. They'd been planning this, planning to discredit her if she got too close, planning to use her grief, her isolation, her dedication to her father's memory against her. Clara closed the laptop and sat in the dark, her mind racing. She had everything. Proof of the fraud, proof of the fake will, proof of their conspiracy, her father's true wishes. But she was 20 years old, alone, and facing people who'd proven they would do anything to protect their secrets. People who'd possibly murdered her father. People who were now planning to destroy her credibility if she spoke up. She needed help. Real help. Someone she could trust. But who? Grant had connections throughout the business. Verena had charmed everyone in their social circle. Even the family lawyer, the one who'd read the fake will, might be compromised. Clara made 3 decisions that night. First, she would make copies of everything. Multiple copies stored in multiple locations, with multiple people who had instructions to release them if anything happened to her. Second, she would document everything going forward. Record conversations, save messages, build a trail that couldn't be erased. Third, she would be smarter than they were, more patient, more careful. If they wanted to call her crazy, she'd give them nothing to work with. She'd be perfectly sane, perfectly rational, perfectly normal, until she had enough to bury them all. Keywords: evidence collection, premeditated defense, safety precautions, trust issues, isolation tactics, paranoia justified, conspiracy uncovered, death threat. Clara spent the next 2 days making copies. She opened a safety deposit box at a bank across town under her grandmother's maiden name. She uploaded encrypted files to 3 different cloud storage services. She mailed a sealed envelope to her father's oldest college friend, a retired judge in Florida, with instructions not to open it unless she explicitly called and used a specific code phrase. Then she went downstairs for breakfast and smiled at her family like nothing had changed. "Good morning," Verena said, eyeing her carefully. "You seem better." "I am," Clara lied smoothly. "I think I've been holding on to the past too much. You were right. I need to move forward." She saw the relief in Verena's face, the satisfaction. They thought they'd won, thought she'd given up. Good. But Olivia wasn't satisfied. "Really?" her half-sister asked, stirring her coffee with deliberate slowness. "Because last week you were accusing Uncle Grant of embezzlement. That's a pretty fast turnaround." Clara met her eyes. "I was wrong. I misunderstood some documents. Grant explained it to me." "Did he?" Olivia's smile was sharp. "How convenient." "Olivia," Verena warned. "What?" I'm just saying it's weird. Clara spends 2 years acting like a detective in a bad movie and suddenly she's fine. Just like that? I got help, Clara said quietly, playing the role they wanted to see. I talked to someone, a grief counselor at school. She helped me see that I was projecting, looking for conspiracy because accepting Dad's death was too painful. It was perfect, exactly what they wanted to hear. She was admitting to instability, to needing help, to being wrong. Verena actually reached over and squeezed her hand. I'm so proud of you, Clara. That takes real strength. Uncle Grant, sitting at the head of the table, her father's seat, nodded approvingly. Healing isn't linear, but recognizing when you need help, that's maturity. Clara smiled and ate her breakfast and felt like she was swallowing glass. She kept up the act for 3 weeks, being pleasant, being compliant, being normal. And all the while she was gathering more evidence, recording conversations with a hidden app on her phone, photographing documents she found left carelessly in Grant's home office, tracking the money flows, the shell companies, the hidden accounts. She was building a case, not just for fraud, for murder, because the more she dug, the more convinced she became that her father's heart attack wasn't natural. Grant had connections to people who could make things look natural. So Webb, for instance, had a colleague who specialized in cardiac issues, and Richard Moretti had been in perfect health 6 months before he died. Keywords: investigation tactics, undercover behavior, playing victim, evidence gathering, murder theory, corruption network, false compliance, strategic patience. Clara was in the middle of photographing a bank statement she'd found in Grant's desk drawer when Olivia walked in. What are you doing? Clara's heart stopped. She'd been so careful. How had she not heard? Just looking for a pen, she said casually, slipping her phone into her pocket. Grant said I could borrow his office to work on a paper. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Did he? Yes. Ask him. I will. Olivia stepped closer, invading her space. You know, Clara, you're not as good an actress as you think you are. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Olivia's voice dropped to a whisper. You think you're so smart, so much better than everyone else. But you're just Daddy's delusional little girl chasing ghosts. Olivia, he didn't love you more, you know. He just pitied you. Felt guilty that you were so awkward, so weird. That's why he spent time with you. Obligation, not affection. The words were designed to hurt, to provoke a reaction. Clara gave her nothing, just looked at her half-sister with calm, empty eyes. Are you done? Olivia laughed. You really are crazy, aren't you? No wonder they're talking about having you evaluated. Clara's blood went cold. What? Mom and Uncle Grant, they're worried about you. Think you might be a danger to yourself. Olivia smiled sweetly. Just so you know, in case you were wondering why Dr. Webb has been calling the house. She swept out, leaving Clara standing in Grant's office, her hands shaking. They were moving faster than she'd thought. She'd been careful, so careful, but not careful enough. That night, Clara called her father's friend, Judge Morrison. She used the code phrase, told him to open the envelope, to read everything, to be ready. Clara, the judge said slowly, these are serious allegations. If even half of this is true, it's all true, but they're going to try to discredit me soon, maybe in the next few days. I need you to believe me. I need someone to believe me. I do, sweetheart. I knew your father. He wouldn't have left this for you if he wasn't certain. If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you. I won't let it. But Judge Morrison was in Florida, and Clara was in a house with people who'd killed once and were planning to silence her permanently. She'd underestimated them, and now she was running out of time. The psychiatrist's appointment was scheduled for Monday. Clara had 3 days to finish what her father started, or become another casualty of the Moretti family's secrets. The gaslighting started subtly on Thursday morning. Clara came downstairs to find Verena and Uncle Grant sitting at the kitchen table, coffee growing cold between them, both looking exhausted. Oh, Clara, Verena said, her voice heavy with concern. We need to talk about last night. Clara froze. What about last night? Grant and Verena exchanged glances, the kind of weighted look that said, see, it's worse than we thought. The screaming, Grant said gently. Around 2 a.m. you woke up the entire house. I didn't scream, I was asleep. Clara. Verena reached for her hand. Clara pulled away. Sweetheart, you were in the hallway, shouting about documents and murder, and that didn't happen. The housekeeper heard you too, Grant added. Mrs. Chen. She's very concerned. This was a lie. It had to be. Clara had been in her room all night, door locked, sleeping fitfully but sleeping. She would have known if she'd been walking around shouting. Wouldn't she? No, this was the play. This was what the emails had warned about. They were creating a narrative of instability, building a case. I want to talk to Mrs. Chen. She's not here today, Verena said quickly. But Clara, that's not the point. The point is you're not sleeping well. You're stressed, and we think, no, that seeing Dr. Webb on Monday is exactly what you need. Just an evaluation. Just to make sure you're coping okay with everything. Keywords: gaslighting tactics, false witnesses, sleep manipulation, sanity questioning, psychiatric setup, narrative construction, manufactured evidence, reality distortion. The weekend descended into psychological warfare. Friday evening, Clara went to pour herself a glass of water and found a bottle of prescription pills in the kitchen cabinet. Strong sedatives, prescribed to her, dated a week ago. She'd never been to a doctor, never been prescribed anything. "Oh, you picked those up," Verena said brightly, walking in. "Good. Dr. Webb sent them over. He said they'd help with the anxiety. I never agreed to take anything." "You don't remember?" Verena's concern looked so genuine. "Clara, you called his office yourself Wednesday afternoon. You said you were having panic attacks." "No, I didn't. We have the call record if you need to see it." They would too. Clara knew it. They'd create whatever documentation they needed. She watched Verena leave, then photographed the pill bottle, noting the pharmacy, the prescription number, everything, evidence of their tampering, proof of the setup. But who would believe her? A 20-year-old woman with a dead father, accusing her family of creating false medical records, or would they just see a paranoid girl exactly as unstable as her family claimed? Saturday, Clara found her journals missing. The ones she'd kept about her father's death, her suspicions, her discoveries. She'd hidden them in her closet, behind her winter clothes. Gone. "Looking for something?" Olivia asked from the doorway, holding a stack of leather-bound books. "Give those back." "These?" Olivia flipped through one, reading aloud. "Uncle Grant is stealing. I know it. I can prove it." "Wow, Clara. This is really intense. Those are private. They're concerning." Olivia's expression shifted to something almost convincing. Worry, maybe, or fear. "Clara, have you been writing stuff like this for months? These entries, they're not normal. Because they're true. Or because you're sick." Olivia handed the journals over. "Mom asked me to get these for Dr. Webb, so he can understand what you've been going through." Clara snatched them back, but the damage was done. They'd read everything, knew exactly what she suspected, knew she had evidence, or thought she did. And worse, they now had ammunition. Her own words written in her own hand, documenting obsessive behavior, paranoid accusations, conspiracy theories. They'd taken her proof and turned it into a symptom. Keywords: journal theft, evidence tampering, privacy invasion, medical fraud, prescription forgery, family conspiracy, documentation weaponized, psychological abuse. By Sunday, Clara couldn't trust her own memory. She found coffee cups in her room she didn't remember drinking, her laptop open to websites she didn't remember visiting, forums about corporate conspiracy, articles about paranoid delusions. Her phone showed texts she didn't remember sending, rambling messages to old college friends about her family trying to kill her, messages so unhinged that her friends had stopped responding. "They're in my phone," she told herself, alone in her room, door locked, checking for cameras she wasn't sure existed. "They have access somehow. They're creating this. But what if they weren't? What if she was actually losing it? What if the grief, the isolation, the obsessive investigation had finally broken something in her brain? No. Her father's letter was real. The flash drive was real. The will was real. But she checked anyway. Unlocked her safety deposit box key from where she'd hidden it, just to make sure it was still there. It was. But there was also a bottle of vodka in her closet that she didn't remember buying, hidden behind her shoes, like she was a secret drunk. "Clara!" Verena's voice, sharp with concern, from downstairs. "Can you come down here, please?" Clara found them all in the living room. Verena, Grant, Olivia, and Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Chen," Clara said urgently, Tell them I wasn't screaming Thursday night." The older woman looked at the floor. "Miss Clara, I did hear you. I'm sorry. I know you don't remember, but—" "No." Clara's voice cracked. "No, that's not—" "Clara, sit down," Grant said gently. "You paid her. You're paying her to say that." "Sweetheart, no one's paying anyone," Verena said. "We're just worried about you. These accusations, This paranoia. It's not paranoia if it's true. She heard how she sounded. Hysterical. Defensive. Exactly like someone who was unraveling. Mrs. Chen also found these, Grant said quietly, pulling out a plastic bag. Inside were a dozen empty pill bottles. Strong stuff. Anxiety medications, sleeping pills, all prescribed to Clara, all from different pharmacies. I've never taken those. I've never even seen those before. You've been hiding them, Verena said sadly. Sweetheart, this is what addicts do. They hide the evidence. So they don't remember. I'm not an addict! The shout echoed in the silent room. Even Clara was shocked by her own voice. The desperation, the rage. They'd done it. In less than 4 days, they'd made her look unstable, sound unstable, feel unstable. Tomorrow morning, Grant said quietly, we're going to take you to see Dr. Webb. Just an evaluation, just to make sure you're safe. And if I refuse, then we'll have to take more serious measures. His voice was gentle, regretful, the voice of someone making a hard but necessary decision. Clara, we love you, but we can't watch you destroy yourself. If you won't accept help voluntarily, the threat hung in the air. Involuntary commitment. That's what he was implying. They had the documentation, the witnesses, the evidence of instability. They could have her locked up and everyone would think they were doing the right thing. Keywords: false evidence planted, addiction frame-up, involuntary commitment threat, witness bribery, memory manipulation, psychological torture, isolation tactics, entrapment. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat on her floor with her father's flash drive and the hidden will and all her evidence, and she realized she was trapped. If she ran, it would look like a breakdown, confirm everything they were saying. If she stayed, they'd have her evaluated by their corrupt psychiatrist, who would diagnose whatever they needed him to diagnose. If she went to the police, she'd look like a paranoid girl making wild accusations against her grieving family. And they had documentation showing she was mentally unstable. If she did nothing, she'd lose everything. Her father had told her to let them underestimate her, to be patient, to wait for the right moment. But her father had also underestimated them, and it had killed him. Clara made copies of everything, again, uploaded new files, sent new emails, created new insurance policies. Then she did something they wouldn't expect. She decided to go to the appointment, not because she was giving up, but because she needed to see Dr. Webb, needed to meet the man who was being paid to destroy her credibility, needed to understand exactly what they were planning, and maybe, if she was smart enough, if she was careful enough, she could record it, document it, add it to her evidence. It was risky, dangerous. They'd be waiting for her to mess up to give them ammunition, but Clara was her father's daughter, and Richard Moretti hadn't built an empire by playing it safe. At 9 a.m. Monday morning, Clara walked into Dr. Marcus Webb's office with a recording device hidden in her bra and her father's voice in her head saying, "Let them think you're weak." She wasn't weak. She was gathering evidence. And this time the conspiracy would be documented in their own words. Dr. Marcus Webb's office was designed to be calming. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, abstract art that suggested emotion without committing to meaning, a bookshelf filled with psychology texts, and a small Zen garden on the desk, all of it perfectly staged to make vulnerable people feel safe. Clara saw through it immediately. "Miss Moretti," Dr. Webb stood, extending his hand. He was in his early 50s, handsome in that distinguished way money and careful grooming create. "Please have a seat. I'm glad you decided to come." Clara shook his hand and sat, making sure her posture was open, her expression calm, not defensive, not hostile, just tired, the way someone who was genuinely struggling might look. "Your family is very concerned about you," he continued, settling into his chair. "They've shared some troubling incidents." "I know." Clara's voice was quiet. "I'm concerned too." She saw his surprise. He'd expected resistance, denial. "Tell me about Thursday night," he said gently. "Do you remember what happened?" "That's the thing." Clara leaned forward slightly, like she was confiding in him, like she trusted him. "I don't. Everyone says I was screaming walking around the house, but I don't remember any of it. And that scares me." "Memory gaps can be frightening," Dr. Webb agreed, "especially when others tell us we've done things we can't recall. Have you experienced blackouts before?" "Not that I know of, but—" She hesitated, playing the part perfectly. "How would I know, if I don't remember them?" "That's very insightful, Clara. That kind of self-awareness is actually a good sign." He made a note. "Your family mentioned you've been under a lot of stress. Your father's death, certainly. but also some concerns about the family business. Here it was, the careful trap. I was worried, Clara admitted. I found some documents that didn't make sense, but Uncle Grant explained them. I was reading them wrong, seeing patterns that weren't there. And now I don't know what to think. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just... She let her voice crack slightly. Maybe I was just looking for a reason, a purpose, something to hold on to after Dad died. Perfect. She was giving him everything he wanted, admitting to confusion, to potential delusion, to grief-driven obsession. Dr. Webb's expression softened with what might have been genuine sympathy if he weren't being paid to destroy her. Grief can manifest in unexpected ways. Sometimes we create mysteries to solve because accepting loss feels impossible. Is that what I'm doing? I don't know yet. That's what we're here to figure out. He pulled out a small prescription pad. In the meantime, I'd like to start you on something to help with the anxiety and sleep issues. Just a mild sedative. I found pills in my kitchen, Clara interrupted, already prescribed to me, but I don't remember calling for them. Dr. Webb didn't miss a beat. You called my service Wednesday. You were quite distressed. It's not uncommon for patients experiencing acute anxiety to forget they've asked for help. All keywords: psychiatric manipulation, false prescription, memory gaslighting, trap diagnosis, evaluation fraud, corrupt doctor, recorded confession, entrapment documentation. Did I? Clara made sure she sounded uncertain, confused. You did. I have the call log if you'd like to hear it. Another fake record. They'd been thorough. No, Clara took a shaky breath. I believe you. I'm scared that I'm losing my mind. You're not, Dr. Webb assured her. But you are experiencing some concerning symptoms. The memory gaps, the paranoid ideation, the inability to distinguish between real and perceived threats. It felt real, Clara whispered. The documents, the money transfers. It all felt so real. I'm sure it did. That's what makes these types of delusions so compelling. The mind creates very convincing narratives. Delusions. He'd said it. On record, Clara pressed on. So what happens now? I'd like to recommend a short-term residential treatment program, just a few weeks. A safe place where you can rest, process your grief, and get the support you need without the stress of your everyday environment. Residential? You mean like a hospital? A private facility? Very comfortable. More like a retreat than a hospital. His smile was reassuring. Practiced. Your family has already arranged everything. They just need your consent. And if I say no, Dr. Webb's expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough for Clara to see the truth behind the compassionate mask. Clara, given the severity of your symptoms and the potential danger you pose to yourself, if you refuse voluntary treatment, I would have no choice but to recommend involuntary commitment. For your own safety. There it was. The threat. The real purpose of this evaluation. Agree to be locked up or be forced. Clara's recording device was catching every word. How long would I have to stay? That depends on your progress. A few weeks, maybe a month, until we're sure you're stable. A month. Time for them to get rid of all the evidence. Time for them to finalize whatever they were planning. Time for Clara to disappear from the world. Her voice silenced, her credibility destroyed. I need to think about it, Clara said. Of course. But Clara, Dr. Webb leaned forward, his voice gentle. I spoke with your Uncle Grant this morning. There's concern that if you're left unsupervised, you might do something dangerous. To yourself or potentially to others. The things you've been saying, the accusations, I never threatened anyone. Not explicitly. But the paranoia, the fixation on your uncle, the belief that your family is conspiring against you, these are red flags. Serious ones. Clara felt the walls closing in. They'd built the trap so carefully, every piece of evidence pointing to instability, every witness confirming their narrative, and now the authority figure and the medical professional validating all of it. What if I agree? Clara asked quietly. To the residential program. When would I go? Today. Dr. Webb said it like it was perfectly reasonable. Your family is outside. They've brought your things. We can admit you this afternoon. Keywords: involuntary commitment, psychiatric prison, freedom removal, immediate detention, family ambush, escape impossible, rights violation, forced hospitalization. Clara's blood went cold. They weren't giving her time to fight. Time to get help. Time to do anything. This was it. The moment they'd been building toward. She could refuse. She could run. But Grant and Verena were outside, probably with paperwork already signed. Dr. Webb could make one phone call and have her committed involuntarily. The police would side with the concerned family and the medical professional over the delusional girl. Unless, "Can I use the bathroom?" Clara asked. "Before I decide?" Dr. Webb hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, down the hall, second door on the left." Clara stood slowly, moving toward the door with the careful steps of someone who was broken, compliant, defeated. The moment she was out of sight, she ran, not to the bathroom, to the emergency exit she'd spotted when they entered, down the stairs into the parking garage, moving fast but not fast enough to trigger attention. Her phone was in her pocket, her recordings backed up to the cloud, her evidence stored in locations they didn't know about. But her safety deposit box key was in her bedroom. Her father's original documents were in the house. She couldn't go back there. They'd be waiting. She needed help, real help. Someone with power who could fight against the Moretti family's influence. Judge Morrison, her father's friend. Clara called him from a burner phone she'd bought weeks ago, part of her preparation for exactly this scenario. "Judge, it's Clara. They're trying to commit me. Today, right now. Where are you?" "Manhattan, near Central Park. They..." "Listen to me very carefully." Judge Morrison's voice was steady, strong. "I've been reviewing the documents you sent me. You're right about all of it. But Clara, if they commit you, everything you have won't matter. They'll say you created it while delusional. We need you free and credible. What do I do? Come to Florida. Now. Today. I have friends at the state attorney's office. We can build a case, but we need time and we need you safe. My evidence is backed up, you told me. Multiple locations. We'll retrieve it. But Clara, you need to disappear, completely, before they file the commitment papers." Clara looked around the parking garage, her heart racing. She had maybe an hour before they realized she'd run. Maybe 2 before they locked down her accounts, her credit cards, everything. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I'm coming." She hung up and started walking toward the nearest subway station. She didn't see the black SUV pulling out of the parking spot behind her. Didn't see Grant behind the wheel or Verena in the passenger seat. Didn't realize they'd been tracking her phone, the main one still in her pocket next to the burner. She made it 3 blocks before the SUV pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. "Clara," Grant said gently, "get in the car, sweetheart. Let's talk about this." "No, we're not angry. We're just worried. Dr. Webb said you ran out. You seemed very upset. People were watching now. A young woman, a concerned uncle, a family moment playing out on a Manhattan street." "I don't need treatment," Clara said, her voice shaking. "I need you to stop lying." "Clara, please." Verena leaned over Grant. "You're not well. Let us help you. The way you helped my father." She said it loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear, loud enough that it should have mattered. But all people saw was a distressed young woman making wild accusations against her obviously concerned family. "She's been unwell," Grant explained to the nearest bystander, an older woman with a shopping bag. "Grief. We're trying to get her help." "I'm not crazy," Clara said, hating how desperate she sounded, how unhinged. "They're stealing. They killed my father. They..." 2 security guards from Dr. Webb's building emerged from the building. Not police, private security. But they had authority in their uniforms, radios on their belts. "Miss Moretti," one of them said, "Dr. Webb asked us to make sure you're okay. He's concerned you might hurt yourself." Hurt herself. The magic words. The reason they could detain her even without police. "I'm fine," Clara said, backing away. "I'm leaving. I have the right to leave." "Of course you do," the guard said soothingly. "But Dr. Webb has expressed concern about your safety. We just want to talk, make sure you're not in crisis." She was surrounded. Grant and Verena in front, guards behind, crowd of strangers watching with concern and curiosity. And then Dr. Webb himself appeared, moving through the crowd with practiced ease. "Clara," he said gently, "let's go back inside. No one's forcing you to do anything. Let's just talk." Every eye was on her. Every face showed concern. They all thought they were watching a mental health crisis, a family trying desperately to help someone who didn't realize they needed help. No one saw the trap. No one saw the conspiracy. They just saw a young woman visibly distressed making paranoid accusations. Clara made one last choice. She pulled out her phone, the burner, and hit record, held it up where they could all see it. "I'm being set up," she said clearly. "My name is Clara Moretti. My family is trying to commit me to silence me. I have evidence of fraud, theft, and possibly murder. This phone contains recordings of Dr. Marcus Webb admitting..." Grant moved fast, grabbed her wrist, twisted just enough that the phone fell clattering to the pavement. "She's delusional," he told the crowd. "Please, she needs help. She's going to hurt herself." The guards moved in, gentle but firm hands on her arms. "No," Clara fought, but it just made it worse, made her look more unstable, more dangerous. Within minutes she was in the back of an ambulance, Dr. Webb beside her, explaining to the EMTs that she was experiencing a severe psychotic break, that he'd been evaluating her, that she was a danger to herself. Within an hour she was being admitted to Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility, a private hospital in upstate New York, specializing in discreet care for families of means. By evening she was in a locked room, her clothes replaced with hospital scrubs, her phones confiscated, her freedom gone. The legal paperwork was impeccable, signed by Dr. Webb, co-signed by family, emergency psychiatric hold, 72 hours minimum, potentially extended indefinitely based on evaluation. Clara Moretti had been buried alive, not in the ground, in a system designed to make people like her disappear. But they'd made one mistake. They thought 2 years in hell would break her. Instead, it would forge her into something they couldn't imagine. Something terrifying. The truth, with patience, with proof, and with nothing left to lose. Year 1. Survival. The first thing they do in a psychiatric facility is take away your identity. Your clothes, your phone, your belongings. Everything that makes you gets locked in a property room you're told you'll get back when you're ready. You're assigned a patient number. Given a room with a narrow bed and a window that doesn't open. Placed on a medication regimen that makes the world soft and distant. And then you're left to prove you're sane. Except the system doesn't want you to be sane. It wants you to be compliant, agreeable, medicated into calm acceptance. Clara figured this out within the first week. Keywords: psychiatric imprisonment, forced medication, identity erasure, systematic abuse, patient rights violated, institutional control, mind manipulation, chemical restraint. "How are we feeling today, Clara?" Dr. Patricia Reeves asked during their first session. She was the in-house psychiatrist, younger than Dr. Webb, with kind eyes that Clara immediately didn't trust. "I feel fine. I shouldn't be here. Dr. Webb noted that you were experiencing paranoid delusions. Accusations against your family, do you remember that?" They weren't delusions, they were facts. Dr. Reeves made a note. Clara watched her write. "Patient maintains delusional beliefs. No insight into illness." Clara, part of recovery is acknowledging when our thoughts aren't based in reality. Your family loves you. They're very worried. "My family is stealing from our company and had me committed to silence me." Another note: persistent paranoia. Recommend continued medication. Clara learned quickly. The more she insisted on the truth, the crazier she sounded. The more she tried to explain, the more evidence she gave them that she was unwell. So she stopped explaining. She started watching instead. Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility was expensive, private, the kind of place where wealthy families sent problematic members to be handled discreetly. The patients Clara met weren't all mentally ill. Many were just inconvenient, like Richard, a 40-year-old man whose wife had him committed so she could take control of his tech company. "She's selling everything," he told Clara during their first conversation in the common room. "Liquidating assets. By the time I get out, if I get out, there won't be anything left." Or Maya, a 23-year-old woman whose parents had her institutionalized for being gay. "They call it acute gender confusion on my chart," she said bitterly. "The delusion isn't my sexuality. It's thinking they'd ever accept me." Or Thomas, an elderly man whose children committed him for dementia he didn't have. "They're fighting over my estate already," he whispered to Clara. "Updating my will, signing papers, and I'm trapped here. Watching it happen through phone calls they think I don't understand." Meadowbrook wasn't a hospital. It was a warehouse for people who'd become problems, and Clara was just another problem being stored away. Keywords: systemic corruption, wealthy abuse system, patient exploitation, false imprisonment, financial conspiracy, healthcare fraud, witness testimonies, shared trauma. Month 3. Understanding. Clara spent 3 months being the perfect patient. She took her medications without complaint, even though they made her thoughts sluggish. She attended group therapy and nodded at the right moments. She told Dr. Reeves what she wanted to hear. "I think I understand now. I was under a lot of stress. I wasn't thinking clearly." She earned privileges: phone calls home, monitored, supervised time in the facility library, access to the recreation room, and slowly, carefully, she started paying attention to things she wasn't supposed to notice, like the fact that Dr. Webb visited every month, always meeting privately with Dr. Reeves afterward, like the pharmaceutical company representatives who came through quarterly, offering bonuses for keeping patients on specific medications, like the way certain patients, the ones with the wealthiest families, stayed indefinitely, despite showing no signs of actual mental illness. "It's a business," Nurse Julie said one night when she found Clara awake, staring at the ceiling. Julie was in her mid-50s, tired around the edges, one of the few staff members who treated patients like people. "They get paid per patient per day. Insurance or private pay, doesn't matter. The longer you stay, the more money flows. Is that legal?" "What isn't legal is easy to hide when families sign off on everything." Julie checked Clara's vitals, then lowered her voice. "Your family's paying top dollar to keep you here, honey. Direct payment, not insurance. Which means no outside oversight. No insurance company questioning the length of stay. How long do people usually stay? However long the family wants, or until the money runs out." Julie's expression softened. "You seem different from most. Clearer. What did you do to end up here?" Clara made a split-second decision to trust her. "I found evidence that my family was stealing. They committed me to shut me up." Julie didn't look surprised. "Happens more than you'd think. Rich families don't like problems that can't be bought. Do you believe me?" "Doesn't matter what I believe. Matters what I can prove." Julie started to leave, then paused. "But for what it's worth, you don't read like someone with paranoid delusions. You read like someone who saw something they shouldn't have." That conversation changed everything, because it meant Clara wasn't alone, wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining the conspiracy, and it meant there might be someone on the inside willing to help. Keywords: nurse ally, inside witness, facility corruption, patient advocacy, medication fraud, insurance scam, documentation abuse, truth recognition. Month 6, evidence. Clara started documenting everything. She couldn't have a phone or computer, but she could have pen and paper for therapeutic journaling. So she journaled. Every day, every detail. She wrote down which patients were being kept against their will, which doctors were prescribing unnecessary medications, which families were using commitment as financial warfare. She documented dosages, treatment plans, lengths of stay, names, dates, patterns. She recorded conversations in her mind, replaying them until she could write them down verbatim later. Who said what, when, to whom. She turned her journal into evidence, but she was careful. She wrote it like therapy, like she was processing her feelings, working through her delusions. Anyone reading it would see a patient making progress, not someone building a case. "You're writing a lot," Dr. Reeves observed during one session. "It helps," Clara said truthfully. "Getting my thoughts out of my head. May I read some of it?" Of course. Clara handed over her journal, which she'd filled with acceptable content, reflections on grief, admissions of past confusion, expressions of gratitude for the help she was receiving. The real journal, the one with evidence, was hidden in her mattress seam, a few pages at a time, written in tiny print on torn paper she'd smuggled from the library. By month 6, Clara had documented enough to expose the facility, but that wouldn't help her get free. It wouldn't touch her family. She needed more. She needed the original evidence, the flash drive, her father's will, the documents, and she needed access to the outside world. Keywords: secret documentation, evidence collection, hidden records, patient journalism, systematic exposure, facility crimes, witness protection, underground resistance. Month 9, alliance. "I can get you a phone," Julie said quietly one night. "Not to keep, just for an hour. Maybe 2. Clara's heart raced. "Why would you risk that?" "Because I've been here 12 years and I'm tired of watching people disappear." Julie glanced down the hallway. "There's a patient on the west wing, elderly man. His daughter visits once a month, always brings her laptop, says it's for showing him photos. But I've seen her transferring money, changing account access. He sits there, doped up on sedatives he doesn't need, while she steals his life." Julie's jaw tightened. "If I help you, if I give you a phone, can you do something with it? Can you make this matter?" "Yes," Clara said without hesitation. 2 nights later, Julie smuggled Clara into an empty office, handed her a prepaid phone. "1 hour, that's it. Then I have to wipe it and destroy it." Clara's hands shook as she logged into the cloud accounts where she'd stored her evidence. Everything was still there, untouched. Her father's documents, the recordings, the proof. She downloaded copies to a new encrypted service, created backup links, sent them to 3 different email addresses she'd memorized, including Judge Morrison's. Then she accessed her father's old law firm's portal using his credentials, which he'd written down in his letter. She found correspondence from the weeks before his death, emails to his attorney about updating his will, notes about concerns with Grant, and one final message unsent, sitting in drafts. If anything happens to me, investigate my brother. Everything is not what it seems. Clara knows. Trust Clara. Her father had been preparing, he'd known, and he'd tried to protect her, even after death. Clara sent that draft to herself, to Judge Morrison, to the state attorney's office in Florida. Then she made one final call. Judge Morrison, it's Clara. My God, Clara. Where are you? I've been trying to find you for months. Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility, upstate New York. They have me committed. But Judge, I need you to listen. She spoke quickly, urgently, explaining everything. The evidence, the conspiracy, the facility's role in keeping her silent. I'm filing emergency motions tomorrow, Judge Morrison said. Habeas corpus, civil rights violations. But Clara, these things take time. Months. Maybe I don't have months. They're extending my commitment every 72 hours. Dr. Reeves says I'm improving but not ready. They'll keep me here forever if they can. Then we fight harder. But you need to be careful. If they realize you're organizing, I know, but I can't just wait and hope. After she hung up, Clara sat in the dark office, feeling the weight of everything. She was locked in an institution, legally committed, with her family controlling her finances, her reputation, her entire life. But she had evidence. She had allies, she had proof, and she had something her family had underestimated: patience. By month 12, Clara had turned Meadowbrook into her war room. By month 18, she'd connected with 6 other patients whose families had used commitment as warfare. By month 24, she had a network, a plan, and evidence that would destroy everyone involved. She just needed one thing: freedom. And in a psychiatric facility where the locks work from the outside, freedom would have to be taken, not given. Month 20. The network. Clara's hospital room had become command central for a revolution no one knew was happening. The 7 patients who met in secret, during voluntary recreation time, in whispered conversations during group therapy, through notes passed during meals, called themselves the Disappeared. Clara, Richard, the tech CEO, Maya, the young woman imprisoned for her sexuality, Thomas, the elderly man losing his estate, and 3 others: Diana, whose husband committed her to avoid divorce proceedings; Marcus, a journalist who'd been investigating pharmaceutical fraud when his own family turned on him; and Jennifer, a 17-year-old whose parents institutionalized her for refusing an arranged marriage. They were different ages, different backgrounds, different reasons for being trapped. But they shared one thing: they'd all been disappeared by people who were supposed to love them. "We can't all escape," Marcus said during one of their clandestine meetings in the library. He kept his voice low, his eyes on the door. "But if one of us gets out with all our evidence, we take down the whole system," Clara finished. "Not just our families, the facility, the doctors, everyone complicit." "You're the obvious choice," Diana said quietly. She was 42, had been at Meadowbrook for 3 years, her husband visiting monthly to have her sign papers she couldn't read through the medication haze. "You have the most evidence, the clearest case, and you're young enough that people will pay attention. Plus you're scary smart," Jennifer added with a slight smile. "No offense to everyone else." "None taken," Thomas wheezed. At 78, he was the oldest, but his mind was sharp, despite what his chart claimed. "The girl's got a strategic mind. Reminds me of me 50 years ago. Keywords: patient alliance, collective evidence, escape planning, mutual aid, witness coordination, systematic documentation, resistance network, solidarity movement." The plan they developed was meticulous. Each patient would document their own case in detail. Clara taught them her method of hidden journals, coded language, dates and times that could be verified. Marcus, who'd been an investigative journalist, used his recreation time to sketch out the facility's security protocols, staff rotation schedules, and vulnerabilities in the system. Diana, who'd worked in IT before her commitment, helped Clara understand how to preserve digital evidence that couldn't be erased. Thomas, who'd been a criminal defense attorney, outlined exactly what kind of documentation would be admissible in court. Maya, Jennifer, and Richard served as lookouts and messengers, carrying information between patients who couldn't risk being seen together. And Clara? Clara became the repository, the keeper of all their stories, the one who would carry 7 lives' worth of evidence out into the world. "If you make it out," Diana said one night, "promise me something. Anything. Don't just go after your family. Go after all of them. Make it so this can never happen again." Clara nodded. "I promise." By month 22, the Disappeared had assembled a dossier that documented 15 patients currently committed without legitimate cause, 6 doctors accepting payments from families to maintain commitments, 4 pharmaceutical companies providing kickbacks for overprescription, 12 instances of financial abuse happening while patients were detained, evidence of forged evaluations, falsified medical records, and systematic human rights violations. It was comprehensive, damning, explosive. All they needed was a way to get it out. Keywords: whistleblower documentation, systematic abuse evidence, medical fraud, human rights violations, patient advocacy, institutional corruption, legal ammunition, Truth Archive Month 23. The betrayal. The problem with secrets in a psychiatric facility is that everyone is watching everyone else. Staff watches patients. Patients watch staff. And some patients, the ones who've accepted their situation, who've given up fighting, watch other patients and report back. Clara should have been more careful. She should have noticed that Melanie, a woman in her 30s who'd been at Meadowbrook for 5 years, had started sitting closer during their meetings, asking more questions, offering to help. She should have realized that someone who'd been institutionalized that long without fighting back was either broken or working for them. Melanie was working for them. "Dr. Reeves wants to see you," a nurse Clara didn't recognize said one morning. "Bring your belongings." Clara's blood went cold. "Why?" "Just come with me, please." The other members of the Disappeared watched helplessly as Clara was escorted down the hallway. Marcus caught her eye and mouthed, "Say nothing." Dr. Reeves's office was different than usual. Uncle Grant was there, Dr. Webb, and a security consultant in a dark suit who radiated authority. "Sit down, Clara," Dr. Reeves said. Her kind expression was gone, replaced with something harder, colder. "What's going on?" "We've been made aware of some concerning activities," Dr. Webb said smoothly. "Organizing other patients, collecting information about the facility, making unauthorized communications with the outside world." Clara's heart hammered. They knew. Somehow, they knew. "I don't know what you're talking about." Grant leaned forward. "Clara, we have a witness. Another patient. She's told us everything about your little group. The meetings, the journals, the escape planning. Melanie. It had to be Melanie. You've been here nearly 2 years," Dr. Webb continued. "We've been very patient, very accommodating. But this behavior suggests you're not ready to rejoin society. In fact, it suggests your delusions have evolved into something more dangerous." "They're not delusions." "She's done it again," Grant interrupted, looking at Dr. Reeves with theatrical concern. "The conspiracy theories, the paranoia, we thought she was getting better." Dr. Reeves made notes. "I'm recommending transfer to the long-term care facility, high-security wing. Patients there have minimal privileges, no recreation time, no outside communication. It's for residents who pose an ongoing risk. Transfer to a place where Clara would have 0 contact with the outside world, where her evidence wouldn't matter because no one would ever hear about it." "You can't do that," Clara said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "We can and we are," Dr. Webb said, "for your own safety and the safety of others. The transfer happens tomorrow morning." Keywords: inside betrayal, transfer threat, isolation escalation, evidence discovered, security increase, rights elimination, high security wing, final suppression. That night, Nurse Julie found Clara alone in her room, frantically trying to hide her evidence journals. "They're moving you," Julie said without preamble. "I know. Clara, if you go to that wing, people don't come back from there. They keep you so medicated you can't remember your own name. It's where they send patients they want to forget. What can I do? They've increased security. They're watching me constantly." "Then we move up the timeline." Julie pulled something from her pocket, a key card. "This gets you through the West Wing emergency exit. The alarm is disabled between 2 and 2:15 a.m. for maintenance. That's your window. Julie, they'll know you helped me. I'm done caring what they know. Julie's eyes were fierce. I've watched too many people disappear. I've been complicit too long. You get out, you expose this place, and you make sure everyone knows what happens here. The others, the disappeared, I'll protect them as long as I can. But Clara, they need you to succeed. Their evidence doesn't mean anything if you're locked in high security forever. Clara grabbed Julie's hand. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just run fast and burn everything down. The next hours were the longest of Clara's life. She finalized her evidence, consolidating everything into a single waterproof bag she'd stolen from medical supplies. She memorized every detail she might need. Account numbers, names, dates, locations. She said goodbye to the disappeared without actually saying goodbye. A look with Marcus that said, I'll remember. A touch of Diana's hand that promised I'll expose them. A nod to Thomas that meant I'll finish this. At 1:55 a.m., Clara was ready. At 2 South a.m., she slipped out of her room. At 2:07 a.m., she used Julie's keycard on the West Wing emergency exit. The door opened without sound. And for the first time in nearly 2 years, Clara Moretti stepped into unsupervised open air. Keywords: escape preparation, nurse accomplice, evidence consolidation, final goodbye, freedom attempt, calculated risk, point of no return, liberation moment. The facility was in rural upstate New York, surrounded by woods. Clara had studied maps during her library time, memorized the nearby towns, the bus routes, the ways someone without money or identification could disappear. She had $40 Julie had given her, her evidence bag, and the clothes she'd been admitted in, which Julie had retrieved from storage. No phone, no ID, no credit cards. But she had something more valuable. She had the truth. Clara ran into the darkness, her hospital gown flapping against her legs under her jacket, her feet finding purchase on uncertain ground. Behind her, Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility sat lit up like a cruise ship. Beautiful, expensive, full of people trapped inside. She didn't look back. 3 miles later, she found a gas station, used a payphone, and they still existed in rural areas, to call Judge Morrison collect. Clara, his voice was thick with sleep, then sharp with alarm. Where are you? I'm out. I escaped. I need help. Tell me where you are exactly. She read the address from the gas station sign. Stay there. Do not move. I'm calling a friend. Retired FBI. He's in New York. He'll come get you. Clara, listen to me. You're going to be safe now. We're going to finish this. Clara hung up and waited in the cold, watching every car that passed, expecting security from Meadowbrook, expecting Uncle Grant, expecting to be dragged back to that hell. But instead, 90 minutes later, a nondescript sedan pulled up. A man in his 60s with silver hair and steady eyes stepped out. Clara Moretti. Yes. Sam Henderson, friend of Judge Morrison. You look like hell. I've been in hell. Yeah, I heard. He opened the passenger door. Get in. We've got a long drive ahead and a lot of work to do. As they drove away, Clara looked back one time. Meadowbrook was a distant glow on the horizon. She'd survived. She'd escaped. And now she was going to make them all pay. But first, she needed one more thing. The final piece of evidence that would turn her case from personal vendetta to criminal prosecution. The thing her family had hidden for 2 years. Her father's original will, and she knew exactly where they'd hidden it. Sam Henderson drove in silence for the first hour, letting Clara decompress, letting her breathe air that wasn't filtered through institutional ventilation. When they finally stopped at a diner in rural Pennsylvania, Clara looked almost normal in the borrowed clothes Sam had brought. Jeans, a sweater, boots. The hospital gown was in a trash bag in the trunk, evidence of where she'd been. Eat, Sam ordered, sliding a menu across the table. Judge Morrison said you were sharp, but I need you functional. Can't fight wars on an empty stomach. Clara ordered everything. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, coffee. Food that didn't taste like institutional bulk cooking. She ate like she was storing up calories for battle. Morrison filled me in on some of it, Sam said, sipping black coffee. Family conspiracy, fake commitment, evidence of fraud. But I need the whole picture. Everything. Don't leave anything out. So Clara told him, start to finish. Her father's death, the documents, the flash drive, the fake will, the setup, the commitment, the 2 years in Meadowbrook, the disappeared, all of it. Sam listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he leaned back. That's one hell of a story. It's not a story, it's the truth. I believe you, but belief doesn't win court cases. Evidence does. What have you got that's ironclad? Clara pulled out her evidence bag, showed him everything. The journals, the recordings, the documents she'd photographed, the testimony from other patients, the proof of Meadowbrook's corruption. This is good, Sam admitted. This is really good. But it's not enough. What do you mean it's not enough? For the facility? For Dr. Webb? Maybe. But for your family, for proving they murdered your father, you need the smoking gun. You need proof so obvious, so clear, that no lawyer can twist it. The original would help. But Clara, even if we find it, they'll argue your father was unstable when he wrote it, that he changed his mind, that the second will, the one they filed, is legitimate. Sam's expression softened. I'm not saying give up. I'm saying we need more. What more could there possibly be? Confession, admission, them saying it out loud. Sam pulled out his phone. You said you recorded Dr. Webb during your evaluation, that he admitted to being paid by your family to commit you. Oh yes, but nothing, that's the thread. We pull it until everything unravels. He made a call. Morrison, she's with me, she's safe, but we need to move fast before they realize she's gone and start destroying evidence. Keywords: safe house, strategic planning, evidence analysis, FBI ally, legal strategy, smoking gun, confession needed, operational preparation. The plan Sam developed was audacious. Instead of going to the police or the courts immediately, Clara would go back. Not to Meadowbrook, to her family home. They think you're still locked up, Sam explained. They think they're safe. If you show up, when they're not expecting it, when they think they've won, people say things, admit things, get sloppy. You want me to confront them. I want you to wear a wire, walk into that house and let them hang themselves. Sam pulled out equipment, tiny recording devices, backup devices, equipment that would capture everything. You asked what more you could possibly need. This. Them admitting what they did, all of it, on tape. What if they hurt me? I'll be outside with backup. Retired FBI means I still have friends. You're never alone in that house. His expression hardened. But Clara, I won't lie to you, this is dangerous. If they realize you're recording, if they panic, they've already taken 2 years of my life. They've already destroyed my credibility. What else can they take? Your life, Sam said bluntly. If they killed your father, they can kill you. Clara met his eyes. Then I guess we better make sure they say it out loud before they try. They spent 2 days preparing. Sam coached her on interrogation techniques, how to ask questions that elicited confessions, how to handle pushback, how to keep people talking even when they wanted to stop. Judge Morrison filed emergency motions to have Clara's commitment reviewed, creating a paper trail that would protect her legally. If anything happened, there would be documentation showing she'd escaped and why. And Clara prepared mentally for the hardest performance of her life. She would walk into that house not as a victim, but as a threat, and she would make them talk. Keywords: wire wearing, confrontation strategy, confession extraction, backup plan, legal protection, calculated revenge, dangerous operation, recording evidence, day 3, after escape. The Moretti estate looked exactly as Clara remembered. Sprawling mansion in Westchester County, manicured lawns, the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted. Clara stood at the gate with Sam's equipment hidden under her clothes and her father's voice in her head. Burn their world down. Radio check, Sam's voice said through the tiny earpiece. Can you hear me? Yes, Clara whispered. Good. Remember, you're in control. Keep them talking. Don't get emotional. And Clara, the moment you feel unsafe, you say the code word and we come in. Understood. Understood. Clara pressed the intercom button. Yes, Verina's voice filtered through the speaker. It's Clara. I'm home. Silence. Long enough that Clara thought maybe they wouldn't open the gate. Then, how did you... I walked. We need to talk. More silence. Then the gate clicked open. Clara walked up the driveway she'd walked 1,000 times as a child. But this time was different. This time she wasn't the daughter returning home. She was the prosecutor gathering evidence. The front door opened before she reached it. Verina stood there, immaculate as always, but Clara saw the crack in her composure, the flash of panic before the mask slid into place. Clara, my God, we've been so worried. Meadowbrook called, said you'd left. I escaped, Clara corrected, because I was never supposed to be there in the first place. Sweetheart, you're not well. Let me call Dr. Webb. Don't. Clara's voice was steel. I'm not going back. And if you try to make me, I'll start talking to people. Reporters, lawyers, anyone who'll listen. Verina's expression shifted. Calculating now. Come inside. Let's discuss this rationally. The house smelled the same. Expensive candles and fresh flowers, and the faint scent of her father's cologne that Verina still used in the study to maintain the illusion that he'd just stepped out. Uncle Grant and Olivia were in the living room, clearly summoned by text, while Clara was walking up the driveway. "Clara," Grant said, standing. "Thank God you're safe. We were so worried." "Stop." Clara stood in the center of the room, facing all three of them. "I know what you did. All of it. The fake will, the embezzlement, the commitment, everything." "You're not well," Olivia said, but her voice wavered. "You need help." "I needed help 2 years ago. What I need now is the truth." Clara pulled out her phone, not the recording phone, a decoy. "I spent 2 years in that facility, 2 years documenting every single thing you did, and now I'm ready to share it with the world." "Clara, please," Verina started. "Unless," Clara interrupted, "you give me what I want." Grant's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" "The original will, the one Dad wrote a week before he died. The one you hid." The room went silent. "There is no other will," Grant said carefully. "Yes, there is. He left controlling interest to me. He cut you out completely. And you couldn't allow that, could you?" Clara took a step toward him. "So you made sure that will never saw the light of day, just like you made sure Dad never lived to enforce it." "That's insane," Olivia said, but she was looking at Grant, not Clara. "Is it?" Clara turned to her half-sister. "Tell me, Olivia, the night Dad died, where was Uncle Grant?" I don't remember. He was here, in the study with Dad. I heard them arguing earlier that day. Did you know that?" "Clara, you're confused." Verina tried to intervene. "I'm not confused. For the first time in 2 years, I'm absolutely clear." Clara looked at each of them. Dad confronted Grant about the embezzlement. Grant panicked. And that night, Dad had a heart attack that was very convenient for everyone involved. Keywords: home confrontation, wire recording, accusation strategy, psychological warfare, truth extraction, family breakdown, murder accusation, evidence baiting. "You think I killed Richard?" Grant's voice was low, dangerous. "Did you? Your father had heart disease. He was under stress. He had a massive coronary. It happens to perfectly healthy men in their 50s, men who just discovered their brother was stealing from them." "You can't prove anything," Olivia said suddenly. "You were locked up, deemed mentally unfit. Nothing you say has credibility. You'd be surprised what I can prove." Clara pulled out a flash drive, another decoy. "Dad left me everything, evidence, documentation, proof of every dollar Grant stole, every fake transaction, every shell company. It's all here." Grant's expression changed. "Real fear now. Where did you get that?" "Dad hid it for me because he knew what you were." Clara held the flash drive up. "And tomorrow I'm giving it to the FBI, along with evidence that you had me falsely committed, that you paid Dr. Webb to keep me locked up, that you've been stealing from the company for years." "Clara, let's all just calm down." Verina moved toward her. "Stay back." Clara's voice cracked like a whip. "I'm done being calm. I'm done being reasonable. You took my father. You took my freedom. You took 2 years of my life, and now I'm taking everything from you. You're making a mistake," Grant said quietly. "A very serious mistake." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. You walk out of here, go to the authorities, try to destroy this family. You have no idea what you're starting. Then help me understand." Clara moved closer to him, making sure the recording device caught every word. "Tell me what happens to people who threaten the Moretti family." "Did Dad threaten you? Is that why he's dead?" "He died of natural causes." "Did he?" Clara pressed. "Or did you help those causes along?" "I didn't kill my brother," Grant roared, and Clara saw it, the crack in his control. He was dying anyway. The heart condition. "He didn't have a heart condition," Clara said softly. "His medical records showed he was perfectly healthy. I checked. The records from after his death that showed heart disease, those were added later, by a doctor on your payroll." Grant's face went white. "You did kill him," Clara whispered. "Oh my God, you actually killed him." "It wasn't—" Grant stopped himself, looked around at Verina and Olivia, both staring at him with horror. He was going to destroy everything. Everything I'd built. I couldn't let him— "Grant, shut up!" Verina snapped. But it was too late. Grant looked at Clara, and she saw him realize what he'd just said, what he'd just admitted. "You're wearing a wire," he said slowly. "No, I—" He moved fast, grabbed her arm, ripped open her jacket. and found the recording device taped to her chest. "Sapphire!" Clara screamed. The code word. The front door crashed open. Sam and 3 others, moving with professional precision. Grant released Clara like she was burning. Verena let out a small scream. Olivia dropped her phone. "Grant Moretti," Sam said, pulling out credentials. "FBI. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment, and based on what I just heard through that wire, conspiracy to commit murder." Clara stepped back, trembling, as Sam's team moved in. "Read them their rights. Cuffed them." Grant looked at her with pure hatred. "You're still Richard's weak little girl. Playing detective." "No," Clara said quietly. "I'm Richard's daughter, and I just did what he taught me." "What's that?" "I got the evidence, and I let you hang yourself." As they were led out, Clara stood in her father's house, her house now, and felt something break loose in her chest. Not revenge, justice. But she wasn't done yet. The will, the final proof. She knew exactly where it was hidden. The arrests made national news within hours. Wealthy family arrested in psychiatric commitment scheme. Moretti empire crumbles amid fraud and murder allegations. Woman institutionalized for 2 years exposes family conspiracy. Clara watched the news coverage from Sam Henderson's safe house, still processing that she'd actually done it, that they were actually in custody. But the story wasn't complete. "They'll get lawyers," Sam warned. "Expensive ones. They'll claim the recording was coerced, that you were mentally unstable." That Grant's admission was taken out of context. The wire recording is clear. Clear enough for arrest, maybe not clear enough for conviction. Sam pulled up files on his laptop. "We need the original will. We need Dr. Webb's financial records showing payment from your family. We need your father's medical records. The real ones, not the falsified versions." "Where do we start?" "With the loose end. Verena." Verena Moretti had been released on bail within 24 hours. Her lawyer, one of the best defense attorneys in New York, had argued that she was merely a grieving widow who trusted her late husband's brother, that she had no knowledge of fraud or false commitment. She was under house arrest, monitoring bracelet on her ankle, and according to Sam's FBI contacts, she was cooperating, or claiming to cooperate. "She's trying to cut a deal," Sam explained, blaming everything on Grant, saying she was manipulated, coerced, didn't understand what was happening. That's bullshit, probably, but if she gives us evidence against Grant, the prosecutor might offer immunity. "No," Clara's voice was ice. "She was part of it. She helped commit me. She doesn't get to walk away. Then we need to prove her involvement. Unequivocally." Clara thought about it, about Verena, always careful, always staying in the background, letting Grant be the visible villain while she orchestrated from the shadows. "She has my father's will," Clara said suddenly. "The original. She has to. Grant wouldn't have kept it. Too risky if someone searched his things. Olivia is too careless. But Verena, she'd keep it close, keep it safe. Insurance in case Grant ever tried to turn on her." "Where would she hide it?" Clara smiled grimly. "I know exactly where. Keywords: media exposure, public scandal, bail release, legal maneuvering, immunity deal, evidence hunt, hidden will, strategic raid." That night, Clara did something technically illegal. She went back to her family home. Her home, legally, though Verena was still living there pending trial. She had keys, she had right of access, and she had Sam's reluctant blessing. "I can't officially condone breaking and entering, but I also can't stop you from entering property you technically own." Verena's monitoring bracelet meant she couldn't leave the house, but it didn't prevent other people from entering. Clara waited until 2 a.m., disabled the new security system with the master code her father had installed, the one he'd made Clara memorize in case of emergency. This qualified. The house was dark and silent. Clara moved through it like a ghost, years of living here making every floorboard, every creaking stair, familiar territory. She found Verena in the study, her father's study, sitting in the dark, drinking wine. "I wondered if you'd come," Verena said without turning around. Clara froze. "I didn't think you'd be awake. Haven't slept since the arrest. Hard to sleep when your whole life is falling apart." Verena took a long drink. "You destroyed everything, Clara. I hope you're proud. You destroyed yourself. I just revealed it." Verena laughed bitterly. "You're so self-righteous, just like your father. Do you know what it was like being married to Richard Moretti? Always being second, always being compared to his first wife, his perfect dead first wife. And you, God, you were her ghost made flesh. He looked at you and saw her. This isn't about you and Dad. Everything is about me and your father. Verena spun around, her face twisted with rage and grief. I gave him everything. I ran his house. I raised his daughter when he was too busy building his empire. And what did I get? A monthly allowance in his will, $20,000, like I was the help. You got what you deserved. I deserved everything. Verena stood, unsteady. I was his wife. I made that house a home. I entertained his clients. I managed his life, and he left everything to you. A child who spent all her time in books and in his study, never appreciating the life we'd built. The life you stole. We didn't steal anything. We took what should have been ours. Verena moved closer. Grant built that company as much as Richard did. He just didn't get the credit, didn't get the recognition. Richard took everything and expected Grant to be grateful for scraps. So you helped him steal it. We reclaimed it. There's a difference. Clara took a breath. Where's the will, Verena? The real one. What will? The one Dad wrote a week before he died. The one that proves you knew about the inheritance. The one you've been hiding for 2 years. Verena's expression shifted, calculation replacing rage. Even if such a will existed, what makes you think I'd tell you where it is? Because you're facing accessory to murder charges. Because Grant is going to testify against you to save himself. Because your lawyer is already negotiating a deal that might not exist if we can prove you actively concealed evidence. Clara stepped closer. Where is it, Verena? They stared at each other in the dark study. Two women who'd never liked each other, who'd always been rivals for Richard's attention, now facing off over his legacy. He never loved you, Clara said quietly. Did he? Not the way you wanted? Not the way he loved my mother? Verena's hand moved fast. The slap echoed in the silent room. Clara didn't flinch, just looked at her stepmother with cold eyes. Where is the will? Say keywords: midnight confrontation, psychological warfare, family secrets revealed, jealousy exposed, inheritance battle, evidence location, confession extraction, final showdown. Verena crumbled, not physically. She didn't collapse or cry, but something inside her broke, and Clara saw it happen. Behind the portrait, Verena whispered. Your father's portrait in this room. There's a safe. The combination is your mother's birthday. Clara turned to the oil painting of her father that dominated one wall, removed it carefully. Behind it was indeed a safe, old-fashioned, but secure. She entered her mother's birthday, a date her father had never forgotten, even after remarrying, even after building a new life. The safe opened. Inside was a document box, and inside that, sealed in plastic, was her father's will, the real one, dated 1 week before his death, notarized, witnessed. Clara held it with shaking hands. He came home that night, Verena said quietly. The night he died. He'd been to his lawyer. He had this with him. He told Grant that he was cutting him out, that he knew about the embezzlement, that he was going to the police. And Grant lost it, started shouting, threatening. Your father clutched his chest, just clutched it and collapsed. Verena's voice was empty, hollow. Grant panicked. We both panicked. We called 911, but we knew it was too late. And then Grant said, he said we could fix this, that we could make it work in our favor. He murdered him. He didn't. It was a heart attack. The stress, the confrontation. Convenient stress. Convenient confrontation. Convenient timing. Clara held up the will. This proves you both had motive, had means, had opportunity. It proves nothing. Your father had a heart attack. That's what the medical examiner said. A medical examiner who was paid to add false heart disease to the records. We already have his financial records. He's cooperating. Clara moved toward the door. It's over, Verena, all of it. Clara, Verena's voice stopped her. Do you really think this will make you happy? Destroying us, getting your revenge? Clara turned back. This isn't revenge. This is justice. There's a difference. Is there? Because you look just as destroyed as the rest of us. Clara met her eyes. Maybe, but at least I can sleep at night. Can you? She left Verena standing in the dark study, alone with her wine and her guilt. By dawn, Sam had the will. His FBI team had secured it as evidence, and Verena's house arrest had been revoked. She was back in custody, this time charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to conceal evidence of murder. The case was building, piece by piece, truth by truth. But there was one more person who needed to face justice. Dr. Marcus Webb, the man who'd been paid to keep Clara locked away, who'd built his career on destroying people's credibility for money, who'd created medical records, false diagnoses, and institutional nightmares for dozens of patients besides Clara. "We're going after him next," Sam said. "And we're going after Meadowbrook, the whole facility. Every doctor, every administrator, everyone involved." "Good," Clara said, "because this isn't just about my family anymore. It's about every person who's been disappeared, every patient who couldn't fight back." "The disappeared," Sam said, referencing Clara's group. "They ready to testify?" "They've been ready for years. They just needed someone to listen." The trial would be national news. The testimony would be devastating, and Clara Moretti would stand in court and tell her story, not as a victim, but as a survivor who turned evidence into ammunition and silence into a weapon. 3 months later, New York County Courthouse. The trial of Grant Moretti, Verena Moretti, and Dr. Marcus Webb was everything Clara had imagined, and worse. The media circus was relentless. Camera crews outside the courthouse, reporters shouting questions, legal analysts dissecting every moment of testimony on cable news. The Moretti murder trial, Day 1. Clara sat in the witness section, waiting for her turn to testify. Sam beside her, solid and steady. Judge Morrison had flown up from Florida, and behind them, a row of familiar faces, the disappeared. Richard, Marcus, Diana, Thomas, Maya, Jennifer. All of them freed from Meadowbrook after Clara's evidence had triggered a federal investigation, all of them ready to tell their stories. The prosecution's case was methodical, devastating. They started with the money. Forensic accountants testified about the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the systematic embezzlement that had siphoned over $40 million from Moretti Enterprises over 5 years. They showed Grant's signatures, his authorization codes, his fingerprints all over transactions that funneled money from the company to accounts he controlled. Grant's lawyer argued it was legitimate corporate restructuring, that Grant had authorization as CFO, that everything was above board. Then the prosecution introduced Richard Moretti's emails, the ones he'd written to his lawyer, to the board, documenting his suspicions, his evidence, his intention to report Grant to authorities. He knew, the prosecutor said simply. Richard Moretti knew what his brother was doing, and 3 days after sending these emails he was dead. Keywords: courtroom drama, forensic evidence, financial testimony, email proof, murder timeline, prosecution strategy, public trial, media spectacle. The medical testimony was worse. The medical examiner who'd handled Richard's autopsy took the stand, admitted under oath that Grant had paid him $50,000 to add cardiac disease to the death report. There was no evidence of pre-existing heart conditions, the ME testified, his voice shaking. The heart attack was sudden, acute, and in a patient with no risk factors, highly suspicious. But I was instructed to frame it as natural causes. Who instructed you? The prosecutor asked. Grant Moretti. He said the family couldn't handle more scrutiny, that they were grieving, that it would be a kindness to call it natural. And you believed him? I believed the $50,000 he offered. Grant's lawyer objected, argued entrapment, argued hearsay, but the damage was done. Richard Moretti's death wasn't natural. It was murder, or at minimum, manslaughter, a confrontation that triggered a fatal cardiac event in a healthy man. Then came Dr. Webb's testimony. The psychiatrist looked smaller in the witness box, less authoritative. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was a man watching his career collapse in real time. The prosecution walked him through his relationship with the Moretti family, the payments he'd received, the false diagnosis he'd created for Clara. Miss Moretti exhibited no signs of genuine psychiatric illness, the prosecutor stated. Is that correct? She exhibited signs of stress, of grief. Did she exhibit signs of paranoid delusions, of psychosis, of the conditions you diagnosed her with? Silence. Dr. Webb, she exhibited concerning ideation. Concerning to whom? To her family who wanted her silenced? Or concerning in a clinical sense? I believed at the time. You believed what you were paid to believe. The prosecutor held up bank records. $50,000 to diagnose Clara Moretti as mentally unstable. Another $200,000 over 2 years to keep her committed at Meadowbrook. You didn't treat her, Dr. Webb. You imprisoned her for money. Webb's lawyer tried to salvage it, argued that Webb had genuinely believed Clara was unwell, that the payments were consulting fees, that everything was above board. Then the prosecution played the recording. Clara's wire from the initial evaluation. Webb's voice clear and damning. Given the severity of your symptoms and the potential danger you pose to yourself, if you refuse voluntary treatment, I would have no choice but to recommend involuntary commitment. I spoke with your Uncle Grant this morning. There's concern that if you're left unsupervised, you might do something dangerous. Your family has already arranged everything. They just need your consent, and if you say no, I would have to recommend involuntary commitment. For your own safety. The courtroom listened in silence as Webb's recorded voice threatened Clara with imprisonment, as he admitted that her family had arranged everything, as he revealed the conspiracy in his own words. When it finished, Webb was white-faced, sweating. "That's your voice, correct?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes, but... and that's you threatening Miss Moretti with involuntary commitment unless she agreed to be imprisoned. I was concerned for her welfare. You were concerned about your paycheck." The prosecutor's voice was cold. "How many other patients have you falsely committed, Dr. Webb? How many other families have paid you to silence their problems?" Webb's lawyer called for a recess. The judge granted it, but everyone in that courtroom knew this wasn't just about one woman. This was about a system that could be bought, about doctors who valued money over ethics, about families who used medicine as warfare. Keywords: witness testimony, recorded evidence, payment proof, conspiracy revealed, medical ethics violation, false diagnosis exposed, corruption admitted, truth emerges. When Clara finally took the stand, the courtroom was packed. She dressed carefully, professional but not expensive, credible but not theatrical. Sam had coached her. "Tell your story. Simply. Clearly, don't exaggerate, don't emote, just facts." The prosecutor started gently, asked about her childhood, her relationship with her father, his death. Clara told it all. The closed-door conversations, the missing documents, the way her family had gaslit her, isolated her, made her question her own sanity. "They called me crazy," Clara said quietly. "But I wasn't crazy, I was right. About everything." "How did that feel? Being right, but having no one believe you? Like drowning, like screaming underwater where no one can hear." The prosecutor showed the jury Clara's journals from Meadowbrook, the meticulous documentation, the evidence she'd collected. "Does this look like the work of someone experiencing psychosis?" the prosecutor asked. "Or does it look like someone fighting for their life with the only weapons they had?" Then came cross-examination. Grant's lawyer was expensive and good. He tried to paint Clara as vengeful, as someone who'd built an elaborate conspiracy theory to justify her inability to accept her father's death. "Isn't it true, Miss Moretti, that you were obsessed with your father, that you spent years going through his belongings?" "I was looking for the truth, or creating a truth that made you the hero of your own story. I was looking for evidence. I found it. Evidence that you interpreted through the lens of grief and paranoia. Evidence that has been corroborated by financial experts, medical examiners, and your client's own admissions." The lawyer shifted tactics. "You spent 2 years in a psychiatric facility. During that time, were you medicated?" "Yes, against my will. Medications that can cause confusion, memory issues, even false memories. Medications designed to keep me compliant, to make me easier to manage. But they did affect your cognition?" Clara leaned forward. "What affected my cognition was being imprisoned for 2 years while my family stole my inheritance and destroyed my credibility. The medication was just another tool they used to control me." The jury shifted. Some nodded. They were seeing her, really seeing her. "Miss Moretti," the lawyer tried again, "isn't it possible that you've convinced yourself of this conspiracy because the alternative, that your father died naturally and your family was trying to help you, is too painful to accept?" Clara looked at him, then at Grant, then at the jury. "My father wrote me a letter," she said quietly. "Before he died, he told me that my uncle was stealing, that my stepmother was helping him, that they would try to discredit me, that I needed to be strong." Her voice caught. He knew what they were, and he tried to protect me, and they killed him for it." "Objection," Grant's lawyer started. "I'll rephrase," the prosecutor interrupted. "Clara, do you believe your father was murdered?" "I know he was. Maybe not with a weapon, maybe not with intent, but they created the circumstances that killed him. They confronted him. They cornered him. They made him believe his own brother would destroy everything he'd built." Clara's eyes filled. "That kind of betrayal, that kind of stress, it breaks people. It broke my father, and they knew it would." The courtroom was silent. Keywords: victim testimony, cross-examination, emotional truth, jury connection, credibility established, conspiracy validated, father's memory honored, justice pursued. The other members of the disappeared testified over the next 3 days. Richard, the tech CEO, explained how his wife had him committed to steal his company, showed emails between her and Dr. Webb planning the commitment. Diana testified about her husband using psychiatric hospitalization as a weapon in divorce proceedings, about signing papers she couldn't read through the medication fog. Marcus, the journalist, revealed that he'd been investigating pharmaceutical fraud when his own family, who'd received payments from the company he was exposing, had him committed to stop publication. Each story was different, but each story was the same. People disappeared for being inconvenient, for knowing too much, for threatening the wrong people, and at the center of every story was either Dr. Webb or one of his associates, Meadowbrook, or a similar facility. The same playbook used again and again. The facility's administrator testified under immunity, admitted that Meadowbrook's business model relied on long-term patients whose families paid directly. That discharge dates were influenced by payment continuation. That medical treatment was secondary to revenue generation. We called them residents, not patients, the administrator said, because it felt less medical, more residential. But the truth is, we were running a very expensive prison. By the time the prosecution rested, the case was overwhelming. Financial fraud, proven. False commitment, proven. Medical malpractice, proven. Conspiracy, proven. The only question remaining was murder. Had Grant killed Richard? Or had Richard's heart attack been a tragic but natural consequence of stress? The prosecution argued it was murder, that Grant had knowingly created circumstances that would be fatal, that he'd confronted a man with heart disease, a condition they'd falsified but couldn't prove existed, with the intent to silence him. The defense argued it was manslaughter at worst, that Grant had argued with his brother but hadn't intended harm, that cardiac events are unpredictable. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. On the charge of first-degree murder, not guilty. Clara's heart sank. On the charge of second-degree murder, not guilty. Sam squeezed her hand. On the charge of voluntary manslaughter, guilty. The courtroom erupted. Grant was also found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment and obstruction of justice. Verena was found guilty as an accessory after the fact to manslaughter, guilty of conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, and guilty of fraud. Dr. Webb was found guilty of medical malpractice, fraud, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, and violation of medical ethics so severe that his license was immediately revoked. Sentencing would come later. But the verdicts were clear. They had destroyed Clara's life, and now justice was destroying theirs. As the judge dismissed the jury and set a date for sentencing, Clara sat in the courtroom and finally let herself cry. Not tears of rage, not tears of pain, tears of relief, because finally, after everything, the world knew the truth, and the truth had set her free. 6 weeks later, sentencing day. The courtroom was quieter this time. The media circus had died down. The story had been told. Now came the consequences. Grant Moretti stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit. The expensive suits were gone. The authority was gone. He looked like what he was, a criminal facing justice. Grant James Moretti, Judge Patricia Whitmore said, her voice carrying through the silent room. You have been found guilty of voluntary manslaughter, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, and obstruction of justice. Before I pass sentence, do you have anything to say? Grant looked at Clara. She met his eyes without flinching. I loved my brother, Grant said finally. Everything I did was for the family, for the company he built. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But they did, Judge Whitmore said. Your brother is dead. Your niece spent 2 years imprisoned. Dozens of other people were falsely committed to silence them, and you profited from all of it. She sentenced him to 25 years in federal prison. No parole for 12 years. Grant's expression didn't change. He'd known it was coming. Verena came next. She cried on the stand, claimed she'd been manipulated by Grant, that she'd only wanted to protect the family's reputation. Mrs. Moretti, the judge said coldly, you actively participated in having your stepdaughter committed to a psychiatric facility for 2 years. You concealed evidence of murder. You benefited financially from fraud. Whatever manipulation you claim to have suffered does not excuse your actions. 15 years. No parole for 7. Verena sobbed as she was led away. Olivia had taken a plea deal, testified against Grant and Verena in exchange for probation and community service. She'd been the weakest link, the one who broke first. Clara saw her in the hallway after sentencing. Olivia looked smaller, younger, defeated. "I didn't know," Olivia said quietly. "About Dad. About the murder. I thought it was just business stuff. You knew enough to help commit me. I thought you were actually sick. Mom said." Mom lied. About everything. Clara didn't have energy for anger anymore. Just exhaustion. You believed what you wanted to believe because it was easier than facing the truth. "I'm sorry." "Are you? Or are you sorry you got caught?" Olivia had no answer. Clara walked away without looking back. Keywords: sentencing, justice delivered, prison terms, family dissolution, apology rejected, consequences realized, legal closure, emotional resolution. Dr. Marcus Webb's sentencing was on a separate docket. His case had become a referendum on medical ethics. The American Psychiatric Association had launched an investigation into practices at Meadowbrook and similar facilities. State licensing boards were reviewing hundreds of cases. Other patients were coming forward with stories of false commitments, unnecessary medications, and doctors paid to diagnose. "Dr. Webb," Judge Whitmore said, "you betrayed the fundamental principles of your profession. You used your authority to imprison innocent people. You destroyed lives for profit. And you showed no remorse until you were caught. 10 years in federal prison. Medical license permanently revoked. Barred from ever working in healthcare again. Webb's career was over. His reputation destroyed. His legacy would be cautionary tale." Clara watched him led away and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just emptiness. "It's normal," Sam said afterward, as they walked out of the courthouse. "You spent years fighting for this. Now that it's over, there's a void. What do I do with the void? You fill it with something better than revenge. You fill it with life." Keywords: medical justice, license revocation, professional ruin, career destruction, ethics investigation, systemic reform, victim validation, moving forward. The civil suits came next. Clara sued Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility for false imprisonment, medical malpractice, and emotional distress. The case settled for $12 million before trial. The facility's insurance company didn't want to risk a jury verdict. She sued Grant's estate for her father's murder. That case was harder, but the criminal conviction helped. Settlement: $18 million, essentially the entirety of what Grant had stolen. The estate itself, her father's company, his assets, was in probate, but the original will had been validated. Clara was the legal heir. Moretti Enterprises belonged to her. At 22 years old, Clara Moretti was suddenly very wealthy and very powerful. She used both. First, she established the Richard Moretti Foundation for Psychiatric Patient Rights. The foundation provided legal assistance to patients fighting false commitments, funded oversight of psychiatric facilities, and lobbied for stronger patient protections. Richard, Diana, Marcus, Thomas, Maya, and Jennifer, the disappeared, became board members. They turned their trauma into advocacy. Second, Clara restructured Moretti Enterprises, brought in independent auditors, established ethics boards, created transparency protocols. She turned her father's company into something he would have been proud of. And third, she started speaking publicly about mental health, about the abuse of psychiatric systems, about families who use medicine as warfare, about the importance of believing patients who say they're being harmed. Her TED Talk, "I Was Called Crazy Until I Proved I Was Right," went viral. 15 million views, sparked national conversation about psychiatric abuse. Clara became the face of a movement she never wanted to lead, but she led it anyway because someone had to. Keywords: civil litigation, settlement, foundation creation, patient advocacy, corporate reform, public speaking, movement leadership, trauma transformed 1 year after trial. Clara stood in front of her father's grave for the first time since his death. She'd avoided it. Too painful, too raw. But now, with everything resolved, she needed to see it. The gravestone was simple. Richard James Moretti, beloved father, visionary businessman. "I did it," Clara said quietly. "Everything you asked. I found the truth. I exposed them. I protected the company. She touched the cold marble. I wish you were here to see it. The wind moved through the cemetery trees. Peaceful. Final. I miss you every day. I'll always miss you. But I'm okay now. I'm really okay. Clara smiled through tears. You taught me to fight for truth, even when it costs everything. Even when no one believes you. You taught me that truth is the only currency that never loses value. She placed flowers on the grave. White roses, his favorite. I hope you're proud. Wherever you are. I hope you know I didn't break. They tried, but they couldn't break me. Clara stood there for a long time, letting the grief wash over and through her. Then she walked away, not running from pain, not running toward revenge, just walking into her life, into her future, into whatever came next. Because Clara Moretti was no longer the girl who'd been disappeared. She was the woman who'd come back, and the truth she'd carried out of that nightmare had changed everything. For her, for the system, for everyone who'd ever been silenced. The woman who was called crazy until she proved she was right. The woman who turned trauma into testimony. The woman who survived hell and came back with evidence. Clara Moretti. Not a victim, a survivor, a truth-teller, a force. 3 years later, Clara stood at the window of her office, her father's old office, looking out over Manhattan, 25 years old, CEO of Moretti Enterprises, founder of a foundation that had helped free over 200 falsely committed patients. She'd rebuilt everything they'd destroyed. Not just the company, not just her reputation, herself. The trauma didn't disappear. She still had nightmares about Meadowbrook. Still felt her chest tighten when she saw white corridors. Still flinched when anyone mentioned psychiatric evaluation, but she'd learned to live with it, to transform it, to use it as fuel rather than letting it consume her. Her phone buzzed. A message from Diana. Just helped another patient get released. False commitment just like us. Thank you for making this possible. Clara smiled. The work continued. The fight wasn't over. But the war she'd been fighting since she was 20, that war was won. Grant would spend at least another 9 years in prison. Verena another 4. Dr. Webb was appealing his sentence, but the appeals would fail. The system hadn't been fixed completely, but it had been shaken, reformed, made more accountable, because one woman refused to stay silent. Clara's assistant knocked. Miss Moretti, your 3 p.m. is here, the journalist from the New York Times, for the follow-up piece. Send her in. As the journalist entered, Clara thought about the question she was always asked. Was it worth it? All the pain, all the fighting, all the years. And the answer was always the same. Yes, because truth matters, because justice matters, because the people who are called crazy, who are locked away, who are silenced, they matter. And sometimes, just sometimes, one of them refuses to disappear. One of them comes back, with evidence, with testimony, with truth so undeniable that even the powerful can't escape it. Clara Moretti had been buried alive in a system designed to erase her, but she'd clawed her way out, and in doing so, she'd proven something essential. The truth doesn't stay buried forever, and the people who try to bury it, eventually they bury themselves. Comment which city you're watching from. And if you or someone you know has ever been told they were crazy for knowing the truth, you're not alone. Your story matters. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be silenced.